Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. October 4th, 2017.
Will Trump be pushed to the left on gun control? Okay. As you know, my friends, I have a column up on WRKO.com. I urge all of you, please, if you can, read it, pass it along to your friends. Massachusetts Democrats insult Las Vegas victims. Here in Massachusetts, Congressman Seth Moulton, Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey immediately are demanding a massive expansion of gun control legislation in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre. So is Pelosi, so is Schumer, and increasingly now it is being echoed all across the mainstream media. They want something done, and they want something done now. And so as the pressure builds upon the president to embrace at least more gun control or more restrictive gun control policies, Trump was specifically asked, and listen to his answer. Roll it, Brittany.
We have a tragedy. We're going to do, and what happened in Las Vegas is in many ways a miracle. The police department has done such an incredible job, and we'll be talking about gun laws as time goes by.
Now, he just may have blown off the question. It just may be like he's slipping a punch. We'll talk about gun laws, down the road. In other words, we'll talk about it, but he's not going to do anything. However, according to many in the Republican Party, they see this as potentially Trump opening the door to being open to, let's say, universal background checks. Banning bump stocks, which were used, two of them were used in this case, which can help convert a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. That there could be other pieces of legislation that they would like to see Trump sign on, in other words, to restrict gun rights and to have more gun control. Steve Bannon has immediately now come out and said that if Trump should embrace gun control in any way, shape, or form, it will be the end of quote-unquote everything. Meaning that his core support is not just in Middle America, it is in particular in parts of Middle America where they are passionately in favor of the Second Amendment, passionately in favor of gun rights. And that if he should go for any kind of gun control legislation, this would blow up his base and you can kiss his re-election goodbye. The media may praise it, Chuck Schumer and Paul Ryan may praise it, and Pelosi may praise it, but his hardcore supporters, his base, his grassroots, will abandon him in droves. My view on this is very simple. As I lay out in my column, number one, to not even stand for a moment of silence, to not even stand and honor, though, the victims, the dead, their families, like Seth Moulton and Catherine Clark did. By the way, the only two who did that were from Massachusetts, is to me morally obscene. It is to me absolutely shameful behavior. It is a disgrace. It is repugnant. You can be for gun control and still honor the dead. According to the Boston Globe, they're lionizing Seth Moulton, saying he took the equivalent of a congressional knee. Well, now you're not just disrespecting the flag. We're not talking about that. Now you're literally spitting on the dead and the victims and their families. So you mean to tell me that you're so warped and obsessed and consumed with politics and ideology, Seth, that you can't even show basic human decency and human emotion? This is just civilized decency. You stand up, a moment of silence, you say a prayer for those that have died and those that are fighting for their very lives. It's called being an American. It's called being a human being. And instead of being ashamed, the guys, they're considering him a hero. The Boston Globe is lionizing this guy saying now is not the time for silence, now is the time for action, now is the time for Seth Moulton to make a bigger stand and call out the hypocrisy up on Capitol Hill. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Even if you want to advocate for gun control, what does this have to do with not standing up in Congress and taking a moment's silence and just simply respecting and paying your respects to the dead? You know, he's a jerk. I said this in my column, and I'll say it again. He is part of the problem in America, the rise of what I call the jerk. These preening progressives who stand there with their moral bullying, their self-absorbed narcissism, and their sense of moral and personal superiority over everybody. And that's Seth Moulton in a nutshell. He's like a teenager who doesn't know how to behave at a funeral. You know, when you moon somebody at a funeral, you may think you're making some kind of a big stand. You're not. You're just behaving like a jerk. And so that's why not only should he be ashamed of his behavior, his constituents, as far as I'm concerned, should demand that he resign. Because this man has turned Massachusetts into a laughingstock, and he is now becoming a national embarrassment. And only the globe could think that this guy is actually presidential timber, presidential material in 2020. But let that go. Gun control is not the answer. And if it was, again, as I point out in my column, then I'll tell you right now, the safest country in the world should be France. Because France has some of the strictest, most draconian gun control laws, not only in Europe, but literally in the world. You can't buy a handgun in France. You can barely buy a hunting rifle in France. You can't buy an AR-15. You can't buy a semi-automatic weapon. You can't buy any kind of a gun practically in France. So they have gun control laws in France that are the toughest, not just, or one of the toughest in Europe, and much tougher than anything we could dream of in America and Canada. And yet what happened? I could cite many examples. Let me cite you one. In 2015, Islamic terrorists, ISIS, went into a theater and a stadium in Paris, armed with AK-47s, completely illegal and banned, and slaughtered 137 people, injured over 350. It was an absolute bloodbath. So if banning guns were the solution, if gun control was the solution, then France would be the safest country in the world. Instead, they have had massacre after massacre. I'm just citing you one. Massacre after massacre after massacre. Why? Because when you ban guns and when you impose strict gun control, you know who obeys the law? Law-abiding citizens. You know who you disarm? Law-abiding citizens. But the criminals, the terrorists, the psychopaths, if they want to get a weapon, they get a weapon. If they want to get a machine gun, they'll get a machine gun. If they want to get an AK-47, they'll get an AK-47. So what you end up doing is leaving your population utterly defenseless against mass murderers and psychopaths like those that you saw in France or that you see all over Europe. So gun control is not the answer. So the question then is this. Leaving aside now the question of radical Islam. I'm not talking now about terrorism or Islamic terrorism. Why have there been so many mass shootings in America, say in the last 25 to 30 years? I address this problem head on in my column. Because Seth Moulton may be screaming for gun control. Elizabeth Warren may be screaming for gun control. Nancy Pelosi may be screaming for gun control. The Boston Globe and the New York Times and CNN may all be screaming for gun control. But guns are not going to be the solution to this problem. Why? During the Eisenhower years, Tens of millions of Americans owned guns. Many of them came back from World War II. Many of them had PTSD. Many of them owned semi-automatic weapons. Many of them owned all kinds of guns, all kinds of rifles. As I point out in my column, my dad was a hunter and outdoorsman. He owned an M16. He owned an M16. He owned several shotguns. He owned several hunting rifles. And he owned several handguns. My dad never murdered anybody. His friends never murdered anybody. So growing up as I did in the 70s and 80s, with the exception, University of Texas, I mean, there were a few. But for the most part, mass shootings were almost unheard of. So what's changed? It's not the guns. It's not the wide availability and accessibility of guns. In that case, the Eisenhower years, as I point out in my column, should have been characterized by endless Sandy Hooks. So what changed? This began really in the 1990s, and it's been with us now for about 25 years. This is the discussion Seth Moulton, Elizabeth Warren, and all the gun control advocates don't want to have. They want to use gun control to distract Americans from the real underlying causes of all of these mass shootings and mass violence. And I'll tell you what it is. It's very simple and it's very obvious. There have been massive, destructive changes taking place in our culture. It's undeniable. We have the rise, as I point out, of prescription drugs. 70% of all American adults now have at least one prescription drug. 50% of American adults have two prescription drugs. The overwhelming majority, opiates or antidepressants. I'm not saying you shouldn't take antidepressants. Some people need them. But there are tremendous side effects that come for some people. So, we know there's mental illness. We know there's a lot of prescription drugs. This has changed. We know the side effects for some of those can be very violent or very destructive. Why don't we discuss this? The breakdown of the family. The loss of moral authority. The loss of respect for authority. Whether it be for your parents, whether it be for teachers, whether it be for the police, I can run down the whole line. Generations now of youth literally hooked on the internet, on playing video games, on iPhones. Look, I love my nephews to death. Don't get me wrong. But I visited them a couple years ago when they were then in Ohio. Now they're in California. I saw some of the video games they were playing. I call her Jen. Her name is Jennifer. I call her Jen. I said, Jen, have you seen what Matthew and Andrew are playing? I mean, they're not just killing people. There are body parts everywhere. They're just shooting at it. You shoot off his arm. You shoot off his head. You shoot off his legs. I go, this is desensitizing the kids. This is almost a form of video pornography. The decline in religion, the decline in morality, the decline in any sense of right and wrong, moral absolutes. We don't teach anymore the Ten Commandments. We don't teach people the need to respect one another, to respect human life. We've taken God out of the schools, God out of our society, God out of the classrooms. What do you think was going to fill the void? The great Russian novelist and philosopher, Fyodor Dostoevsky, once wrote, "Without God, everything is permitted." Without God, everything is permitted. And what he meant was, when you take away religion from a society, when you take away a belief of the transcendental nature of man, that you will be judged after you die for your sins, for the bad things you do in your life, you then open the floodgates. Everything becomes morally permissible, including violence, including mass murder, including wiping people out or slaughtering them, whether it be in schools, whether it be at universities, or whether it be at concerts. But the moonbats are not interested in the truth. The Moonbats don't care about having an honest discussion or finding real solutions to real problems. What the Moonbats care about is propaganda. What the Moonbats care about is to politicize everything, because ultimately I'll tell you what their goal is. They won't say it in public, but in private they all say it. They hate the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment is what backs up the First Amendment. No Second Amendment, no First Amendment. No First Amendment, no Second Amendment. They ultimately want to take away people's guns so that there can be no real opposition to a potential tyranny in this country. That's why our founding fathers had us have the Second Amendment. Because an armed citizenry is ultimately a free citizenry. Don't go after the guns. It's the culture, stupid. 226 here on the great WRKO. Freddie in Beverly. Go ahead, Freddie.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure, Freddie.
I'm thinking about in Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, to have some of the strictest gun laws going, and yet the amount of people that are killed in just this last month alone, September, there was, I believe, 57 people shot and killed by guns in Chicago, Illinois. Almost as many people as were shot and killed in this mass shooting that took place in Las Vegas. So you can see how it doesn't work in situations like that. And Mexico has very strict laws, but we know that it's a lot of people get killed in Mexico. In fact, they're even considering allowing the citizens to carry more arms to protect themselves. So you can see that these people expecting that if you make stricter gun laws, it's going to completely solve the problem. It isn't. I agree with you that there's something deeper that's going on here. And one other thing I wanted to point out about the strange thing going on with this Las Vegas shooting. I don't know if you saw an interview. There was with the brother there of the guy who supposedly did the shooting.
Yes.
He kept stressing over and over again that he did it by himself. First he's saying he's dumbfounded that his brother would even do something like that, and then he kept saying, but it was just him, because that was him, and he kept saying, I can't believe he'd do it in one breath, and then he'd say, well, it was just him, and then he'd say, he's just a regular guy, pretty much stressing the point that any regular person could snap and do it, so it helps with the narrative that, any regular guy could go and do this, so maybe we should take guns away from regular guys. And then the other thing, too, is some eyewitness who was there was interviewed, and he said, they asked him about what he saw and what happened. He goes, my friend was shot in the chest 3 times. And I'm thinking, this is high-caliber bullets. His friend was shot in the chest 3 times. And he's like, yeah, he was shot in the chest 3 times. And they go, well, is he all right? Is he all right? And he says, he said to me, I'm going to do okay. Don't worry about it. And so I'm thinking, this is very bizarre. He seems awfully nonchalant about it. And how could this person survive 3 shots in the chest from a high-caliber bullets like that?
Can't.
Very
strange.
I mean,
it's almost impossible. Thank you for that call, Freddie. No, look, I got to tell you, I don't want to get too off track here, but that brother is a strange fish to me. I've been saying this from the beginning. The way he's laughing, giggling, the way he's just telling these stories. And then you're right, he keeps flipping. On the one hand, it's like an asteroid hit the earth. I can't believe my brother did this. He couldn't have done it. It's the last guy that would do it. On and on. And then from that's one side of his mouth. The next side of his mouth, but he was alone. He acted alone. Well, first of all, did he do it or did he not do it? Because you're claiming he didn't do it, or he couldn't have done it. And how do you know if he acted alone?
Yes, he had a couple of guns. I mean, it's legal to own a couple of guns in the United States. He did not own machine guns that I knew of in any way, shape, or form. He didn't hunt. He barely shot his guns ever. He had a couple of handguns that he kept in a safe. He doesn't even have parking tickets. He has no criminal record. He has no record of any affiliations. He has nothing.
So, on the one hand, nothing. This couldn't be him. I'm stunned. I'm dumbfounded. This can't be the guy. And then, but if he did it alone. Well, I mean, sorry. You know? I mean, now you know he did it?
Something just incredibly wrong happened to my brother. and this happened.
It just doesn't add up. So to me, this guy has been, you want to talk about an odd duck. This guy has been an odd duck from the beginning. So, so to me, I get the sense he knows something, but he doesn't want to say it. For whatever reason, he doesn't want to say it. 617-266-6868 is the number. Evan, any updates on Las Vegas? Let's take it to Evan Heydrich in the newsroom. 2:36 here on the great WRKO. Okay, you want to speak of more fake news. What the media now is trying to do to President Trump on Puerto Rico, is to me beyond disgusting. They are trying to claim that this is now becoming Trump's Hurricane Katrina. As you know, Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 hurricane, has essentially flattened that entire island. It is a territory of the United States, and now people there are desperate to get aid, food, water. Almost the entire island, about 95% of it, has no electricity whatsoever. And instead of helping her own people, the Democratic liberal mayor of San Juan is literally playing politics with the bodies of people in Puerto Rico. 16 died so far because of Hurricane Maria. And rather than trying to help her island citizens, this woman is doing it every round on television. She's doing the media rounds. She's on CNN. She's on MSNBC, CBS This Morning, ABC with George Stephanopoulos. She's doing every show. And she's wearing these ridiculous T-shirts, help, we're dying. And she's essentially claiming that Trump is refusing to lift a finger because Puerto Ricans, her words, not mine, are, quote, brown. You have others in the Democratic Party who are claiming that this has been all about race, that Trump doesn't care about Puerto Ricans because of their race, because they happen to be Latino or Hispanic, and so this is why he has deliberately turned a blind eye and has left these Puerto Ricans to themselves to essentially die in the middle of the Caribbean. Now, a couple of points need to be said. Number one, have you ever been to Texas? Hello, Hurricane Harvey. Have you ever been to Florida? Hello, Hurricane Irma. A lot of minorities. It's not just a lot of Latinos, a lot of blacks. So if he was such a racist, why would he deliver so much aid to Texas and Florida, but do nothing for the people of Puerto Rico? So point number one, it makes no sense. But here is the truth. What the media refuses to report. Puerto Rico is swimming in federal aid. In fact, Trump has ordered the U.S. military, 3,000 troops, to go into Puerto Rico. He, in fact, has a Navy admiral overseeing the federal aid operation. They have dropped tons and tons and tons of aid into Puerto Rico. In fact, there's a famous press conference that the mayor had of San Juan in front of these television cameras, claiming there's no aid from the federal government, and literally behind her are pallets and pallets of food and water. All of it sent by the federal government, i.e. FEMA. So what's going on in Puerto Rico, Jeff? Let me tell you what's going on in Puerto Rico. They have sent water, food, supplies, but they're sitting and rotting in the ports. They are literally sitting and rotting in the ports because the Puerto Rican government, in particular the local mayor, refuses to tell the truckers union to go out and distribute the aid. Because the truckers union, listen to this, are in a wage dispute, and they say if we don't get paid, the aid doesn't move. So they would rather see Puerto Ricans starve and go thirsty than to actually distribute the aid because they want to embarrass Trump and they want to make sure they're lining their own pockets. So why are they not reporting the truth? Why is the media not reporting that Puerto Rico has been flooded with aid, but that it's the local mayor who refuses to do anything to get all of those resources and distribute the aid to everybody on the island? There is a heartbreaking phone call made by a Puerto Rican police officer, a woman. She calls a station in New York, a lot of Puerto Ricans in New York. It's in Spanish, but there's a translation, where she is literally crying on the phone, saying our mayor in San Juan is to blame. We have water, we have food, we have all the supplies, but they're not distributing the aid. Tell the people of New York, tell the Puerto Ricans everywhere, our own government doesn't want to distribute the aid. She's more interested in going in front of TV cameras and playing a soap opera to prepare herself for the next election against Trump by trying to blame him than get the aid distributed. And this poor police officer literally is crying, saying, I can't believe she's willing to do this to our fellow Puerto Rican people. And I'm being told as a police officer, you can only distribute 1 box of water per family, even though they need considerably more, because she wants to have the bureaucracy control everything instead of having the federal government take over the relief efforts. Why is the media not reporting this? Now, let me tell you something else the media is not reporting. Puerto Rico is in the middle of the Caribbean. It's surrounded by water on all sides. So, of course, it's going to be a little tougher to get massive amounts of aid in the middle of the Caribbean than it is, say, to Florida and Texas. Number 2, and this is the mother of all points, Puerto Rico has been run by Democrats. It has been run into the ground. Democratic governor, Democratic mayor, you name it, it's a Democratic stronghold. Puerto Ricans, by over 90%, whether it be in Puerto Rico or in the continental U.S., vote Democratic. They've driven that island into the ground. Puerto Rico is now effectively bankrupt. It is $70 billion with a B in debt. They can never pay that back. In fact, Trump said today he's probably going to have to wipe out the debt. Just wipe it out. We're going to have to eat the debt for Puerto Rico. Just eat it. Because they preferred to spend their money on welfare, massive public pensions, giveaways to their special interest groups, and this is before the hurricane. Before the hurricane, as they spent billions and billions of dollars. The roads were in disrepair. Their electrical grid, their electrical system was completely and utterly antiquated. They didn't even have the basic social services necessary to function. This is before the island hit. Before the hurricane hit the island. So after the island has now been completely and utterly flattened, who do they have to blame but themselves? No one asked you to let your roads become completely full of potholes and basically useless. Nobody told you to run your airports into the ground, completely useless. Nobody told you to not beef up and bolster your electrical system. You misspent all of that money. And then when a hurricane came, Category 5, 200 miles per hour, the island wasn't prepared. And now you're trying to blame Trump? To properly rebuild Puerto Rico, it is going to take $100 billion. $100 billion to rebuild Puerto Rico. To repave and rebuild the roads, repave and rebuild the airport runways and the airports, modernize their electrical system, modernize their water system, In other words, it is going to put a tremendous pressure on our federal budget. It is going to blow a hole sky high, a massive hole in our federal budget. In fact, as Trump himself, at a meeting in front of the Puerto Rican governor, who, by the way, has been praising Trump, saying the response from the feds and FEMA has been phenomenal, Trump openly said that because of the actions in Puerto Rico, because of the need to rebuild that island, as he put it, it's going to put our budget out of whack. Roll it, Brittany. Okay, we don't have that cut, Brittany? All right, play this one then. Here is Trump talking to the leaders of Puerto Rico with the Democratic mayor of San Juan in the room, saying, thank you, Governor, for not playing politics. Sticking it right to the mayor of San Juan.
He's not even from my party, and he started right at the beginning appreciating what we did. This governor did not play politics. He didn't play it at all. He was saying it like it was, and he was giving us the highest grades.
I mean, of course, she's playing politics, and so is the media. Now, listen to Trump, I think completely accurately, say, guys, we're going to eat your debt, $70 billion. It's going to cost us $100 billion to help rebuild the island. You are, let's put it this way, you're becoming a very, very expensive territory for the United States of America.
Now, I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you've thrown our budget a little out of whack because we've spent a lot of money on Puerto Rico, and that's fine. We've saved a lot of lives. If you look at the, every death is a horror, but if you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that died, and you look at what happened here with really a storm that was just totally overpowering. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. Now, what is your death count as of this moment? 17?
16 certified.
16 people certified. 16 people versus in the thousands. You can be very proud of all of your people, all of our people working together. 16 versus literally thousands of people.
Here's the issue now. Essentially, Puerto Rico is a bankrupt island. It's a bankrupt territory. They have run it into the third world. Only the Democrats can take such a beautiful island. I've been to Puerto Rico several times. San Juan is gorgeous. They have some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. It should be a tourist mecca. And instead, they have run it into the ground. It is essentially a third world territory. Only the Democrats can do something like that with one of the most beautiful islands in the world. And so now, because we're going to have to eat their $70 billion debt, we're going to wipe it out, as Trump says, plus spend another $100 billion to rebuild that entire island. Here's what's going to happen. Puerto Rico is going to become essentially a ward of the federal government. Puerto Rico will now become a complete dependency upon the United States and upon the feds and upon us, the American taxpayer. And so in the end, there's only going to be two eventually. It's going to take a couple of years, but there will only be two outcomes. Either Puerto Rico will become a full-fledged state, the 51st state of America, because we're underwriting so much of that entire island, or the American taxpayer is going to say, enough is enough. It's not worth it. Guys, go on your own and become independent. Leave. Either Puerto Rico will become a state, or it will become its own independent nation. My pick, I'd rather have the latter. In all honesty, Puerto Rico is not worth the money we are spending on it. It is time for Puerto Rico to go its own way and let them deal with their own problems. Because Uncle Sam should no longer be Uncle Sucker. Let me ask you, Is it time for Puerto Rico to become a state, or is it time for Puerto Rico to become its own independent state? Should we now be paying all of this money to rebuild Puerto Rico? 617-266-6868. All of your calls. Sean in Pembroke. Go ahead, Sean.
Jeff, it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you, Sean.
I'd like to say that Puerto Rico is sucking us dry. About 6 months ago or so, they said there was a judge there that 98% of the people that showed in front of him, they were giving them disability. They're all sucking off the system, and they're not helping us at all. So, I feel it's time to let Puerto Rico go on its own, and you take care of yourself.
Sean, I'm with you, brother. I mean, look, at this point, no, really, I mean, I'll get into this more even on tomorrow's show. You look at these numbers, it's going to break us financially. So we're going to eat $70 billion, or it's going to cost us another $100 billion just to rebuild that place. Plus, there's a massive exodus of Puerto Ricans. So and they vote overwhelmingly Democrat. So they're now moving into Florida. They're moving into North Carolina. They're moving into Pennsylvania. They're going to flip all those states blue. So if you have Puerto Rican statehood, that's going to be 2 senators guaranteed for the Democrats. Florida now may go blue because of this. Pennsylvania may go blue, and North Carolina may go blue. And on top of it, you still want us to pay $170 billion to basically put this island back on its feet? No. Guys, it's time to go your own way. Bermuda is independent. Haiti's independent. Dominican Republic's independent. It's time you guys become independent. Stand on your own 2 feet. Bill, you're up next. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi,
this
Bill.
Is my first, many calls, first time getting through to you. You're new to this area because you come from Canada. Puerto Rico has been on welfare. I'm 72 years old. As long as I can remember, Puerto Rico has been on welfare. And I was reading a book many years ago, and the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce published a pamphlet. They handed out like flyers in World War II. If we go into America, don't go to Alabama. Go to Boston, New York, Chicago. You get on welfare. You go to these other southern states, you don't get anything. They know what they're doing. You're talking $1.8 billion. Pay them the $1.8 billion and cut them loose. We'll be saving money in the long run.
Bill, look, they're running. Thank you for that call. They're running out of the welfare money. They've spent all the welfare money. So now, literally, I'm not kidding, they've now been relegated. Their debt is now junk bond status. It's a third world country. And so we're on the hook for it now. They want us to continue to be on the hook for it. Plus, because they're Americans, they can go to these states and start voting immediately. No, guys. Whoa. Puerto Rico independence. Puerto Rico now. Viva la revolucion. We'll have a lot more on this tomorrow. I gotta go. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. And together, we're cleaning up the liberal bull.
The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 3 o'clock.